Hey everybody, Kirby Hasseman here with a brand new DMJ one-on-one. Today we're going to look at a session I gave over the summer that talks about some tactics that you can implement right away to make sure that you don't have a summer slowdown or a slowdown in sales any time of year. Let's take a look. Thank you guys for being here. Today I want to talk about, I've got 7 tactics on how to overcome the summer slowdown. Now, obviously there are certain folks in the industry who kill it during the summer, but I think I certainly have friends that do that as well, but there are certainly parts of the industry that struggle, and we have lots of reasons that make this happen. And I want to address some things that will hopefully turn a little bit of this around for you. The reality of it is I love summer. I love being to get out into the weather. I'm in Ohio here, and February isn't always awesome from a weather perspective. So when June and July and August roll around, I love summer, but I don't always love the business results. And so this is actually a conversation that we're having internally with our team right now to try to break those summertime slumps. So we're going to dive in today for those 7 tactics. But before we dive into the tactics, I want to kind of address the elephant in the room, because one of my favorite quotes in the world is, the greatest distance in the world is the distance between I know and I do. And Sandra and I were actually talking about this right before we came on here. Both of us have done sort of different fitness journeys where we've tried to lose weight. And when we talk about what we have done, I said, well, I've lost a little bit of weight, and people are asking me what I've done, and I'm like, well, I've eaten better, I've drank less alcohol, and I've worked out more. The thing we all know should be done. I knew what to do, but I wasn't doing it. And it isn't until we do the thing we know and then do it more consistently that we actually get the results we want to see. So I'm going to challenge you today that I'm probably going to say some things today that you go, yeah, I know that. But push back on that internal dialogue or the dialogue that's happening in your office to say, yeah, we may know that, but are we doing it? And can we do it more consistently? So the greatest distance in the world is the distance between I know and I do. And I want to break down that barrier a little bit today. Okay, so let's jump into the tactics. And if I'm being honest, I struggled to, as I made my list of things I wanted to talk about, it was hard for me to break it just into 7, because I think there's a lot of different things we can do. And I love presentations that are tactical for me, things I can take notes on, things I can be like, okay, yes, I can implement that in my business today. So I'll probably have more than 7 here, but I'll break them down into 7 categories, if you will. So let's start with number 1. Number 1 tactic, change your mentality. And again, folks, I'm looking in the mirror here. I think, we were talking about this before we started going. Why is it that there is a summer slowdown? And I think, the reality of it is, one of the reasons is because we make excuses for ourselves. Hey, none of my clients are in. Everybody's on vacation. Nobody can make a decision. And while that's certainly true for some of your clients, my guess is not everybody's on vacation, even though Instagram seems to make it feel that way, right? There are people in the businesses that we need to call on. There are businesses that we aren't doing business with that have people in that are running every day. So we need to stop making excuses for ourselves. The reality is, I want to go on vacation. I want to go do some fun stuff with friends. And that's great. That's why we work hard. But let's not blame our business results on those excuses. We get, the results from the work we put in. So if we're not putting that work in, we're not going to get those results. So the first thing I would say is we just need to change our mindset by eliminating excuses. And if you want to eliminate excuses, here's a story I tell myself. So John Acuff is one of my favorite authors, and he talks about the soundtracks that are in our brain. Soundtracks are those thoughts that we hear in our own voice that are on a loop. Now, some of those soundtracks serve us, and often many of those soundtracks don't serve us, right? So this is a soundtrack that I'd love to put into your brain. This is separation season. Starting July 1st, going through mid-August, I find that's when most people take their foot off the gas. This is when most people want to do the golf trip. They want to go on vacation. They want to just take off early so they can go outside and enjoy the weather. And I get that. But this is separation season. Your competitors are doing exactly that. And so if you want to gain ground on those people in front of you, if you want to separate yourself from those who are peers right now, this is one of those places where you can really separate. This is if you're willing to do those pieces of work that most people won't do, you will get results that most people won't get. And that's a shift in mentality for all of us. And it's certainly one that I'm talking about in my office today, is that we need to not make excuses. We need to talk about the idea that it's separation season. Now, John Acuff is the person who talks about soundtracks. I got this piece from Ed Milet, so I want to give good credit where credit is due. And he is one of those inspirational influencers that kind of talks about, hey, if we put in the work, we will get results. And that's a key that I want you to kind of, as you change that mentality, you change that mindset. Separation season is a powerful thing in your business. And then the final tactic under tactic 1 is to get humble. Now, what do I mean by that? I am fascinated by the unwillingness of people to make simple, small changes in order to get big results. Back to that idea of I know and I do, right? So often when we want to make a shift in our behavior, in our goals, in the things we want to accomplish, we want to make big sweeping changes because A, it feels good to do it, and then B, we want to show people that we've made this big change. When in reality, especially if you're starting from zero, making a big change is going to be hard to keep going. For example, back to that fitness analogy, I think we're out of shape, and so all of a sudden we're like, all right, that's it. I'm going to do 75 hard, or I'm going to sign up and do P90X. Well, if you have been on a couch for 6 months, doing one of those things might be overwhelming, and it might be something that you can't maintain. When in reality, starting there, if you were simple enough to take a walk 20 minutes a day every day, that's something that you could maintain, and yes, you would get results. Back to sales, that's the thing. I mean, you have to be humble enough to do that little thing. And I think with many of us, we're like, well, I've created this marketing machine that will bring me leads. I've got a team that will do those things. You need to consider whether or not you are willing to do the humble thing that you know you need to do. Are you willing to do cold reach outs? Are you willing to knock on the doors of strangers? Because that is the job of sales. And often, especially if we've been doing it for a little while, we get out of that habit, right? And so we feel like we've risen above the idea that we need to make sales calls and get in front of people and do those things that we did when we were earlier in our career that helped us succeed. So I want to encourage you under this tactic 1, in changing your mentality, that we want to get rid of excuses. We want to understand that this is separation season, and we need to get humble and be willing to do the little things that will cause big change. So that's where I wanted to start with. Tactic 1 is more of a mindset shift. Let's jump to tactic 2. Okay, so we say that it's slow right now. Well, if it really is, then this is a perfect time to really honestly and humbly relook at your marketing. So what does that look like? Maybe it's time to update your website. Does your website actually tell your story? Does it look different than all of your competitors? And I will tell you, in looking at many of my competitors' websites, they don't. They are the same. Distributor Central, Sage, ESP, many of them are exactly the same website if they go to my website or your competitor's website down the street. This might be the time to look at that. Maybe you create a landing page that at least tells your story and then lets them click through to the product page. That's important. Those sites are great. So please don't take this out of context and saying that they're bad, but they're not different, right? Like as Mike Michalowicz says, we all want to be better, but in the minds of our customers, better is not better, different is better, right? And so this might be the time to really look at that website. Make sure that it's telling the story that you want to tell. Are the images updated? Is the staff pictures updated? Is your tagline what you want it to be? These are the times to really spend time on this. Internally, we just recently did this. We said, look, we want to serve a specific kind of client. And rather than us trying to have every industry on our website, we're like, look, HR goes here, marketing goes here. These are the people we work with. And we kind of redefined our website just in the last month to drive those kinds of customers to us in a path that makes sense. Now, again, I always say understanding your niche doesn't mean you hang up on everybody else, but we want to make sure we're serving those people that we really, really want to serve. And one of the best ways to do that is through your website. So this might be the time to look at that. Next up, create or recreate your lead magnet. So for those who don't know, I'll make this really quick. A lead magnet is simply, we want to own our contacts. We want for people we need to be able to communicate with our prospects and customers when we want to do that. We're very used to rented media. We need to get used to owned media. Rented media is those, the radios, the magazines, the whatever, where the other place owns the audience and we can rent it. Creating a lead magnet is simply something of value to those people you want to serve, that it has so much value they're willing to give their email. And look, on the customer side, we all know there are times where you're like, okay, I know if I put my email address in here, then they're all of a sudden going to bombard me with emails. So the lead magnet, the thing that you're going to give, has to be of real value. Now, sometimes that can be as simple as say, hey, I'm going to do a free setup on your order, maybe. But I think more importantly, understanding who you're trying to serve and answering questions or providing them value might be a way to do that. We've worked with folks where it's like, okay, 10 tips for making sure your trade show gets a great return, and really creating a PDF that actually provides value. Maybe they'd be willing to do that if they have a trade show coming up. So if you are living through a bit of a slowdown, then this might be a time to create or recreate your lead magnets so you can build that list, so that when it's time to order year-end gifts, when it's time to essentially launch a new product or have an event that you're going to host, you can reach out to those folks and you get to choose what the messaging is. You get to choose how many see it. I'm a huge believer in our content marketing, and I'm going to talk about that in about 10 seconds. But the fact is, social media is still rented media, because if Facebook decides to change the algorithm, or if TikTok, the legislators get their way and TikTok goes away, that audience goes away with it. So it's important to capture that data so that you can communicate when you want to. So now's a great time to create or recreate those lead magnets that provide value to that audience. And then finally, double down on content. I believe if this is a season where you are not as busy writing orders, you're not as busy fielding phone calls, this is the time to do those things that we said that, when I get time, I'm going to do that. I think back to the pandemic. It was funny to me how all the excuses were stripped away because everybody was at home, and you're like, that 5-day marketing course I was going to create that one time and have never done it. Now I have no excuses. Well, guess what? If it's slow right now, this is the time for you to double down on content. Now, when I say content, it's important that doesn't mean ads all the time, ads all the live long day. This is the opportunity for you to answer questions and show people how to do do merch better in their business. Right before we started talking, Sandra and I talked about this exact same thing. She's like, I want to create content that helps my clients do branded merch well in their business. Create content that helps them do that, right? And it doesn't have to be a sales piece. It's just a give. That builds brand, it builds your integrity, and it builds your trust with those audience. And, one of the things I'd say is almost nobody I know is creating too much content. Like the folks who are influencers, the folks who are building trust through their marketing, Gary Vaynerchuk, Alex Hormozi, Ed Milet, Cody Sanchez, there's so many of them creating amazing, valuable content. I don't feel like it's too much because they're providing me value. If every single one of their videos was saying, hey, buy my latest book, buy my latest shoes, do this, come to this event, if they were all doing this, then that would become a turnoff, right? You can get too much advertising, but if it's valuable content, you don't feel like it's too much. So this is a time for you to understand your audience, provide them value, and then double down on that. So that's tactic 2. Let's move on to tactic 3. And yes, folks, make more sales calls. It's time to get in front of people again. I think we have totally gotten out of the habit of getting in front of people. We want to email them. We want to text them. We want to, all good tools, folks. I use all of them. But our big push in our team is to make more in-person meetings. In-person can include Zoom, okay? Because at least then you do have some of the nonverbal, and that's great. But there's nothing like an in-person meeting. You just will not convince me of it. My daughter is working in our business as well now, Jade, and she has, whether she wants to or not, has been coming with me on some of these meetings. And the cool thing is, she's great at kind of learning the business, taking notes, and making suggestions as well. But what she has experienced is in almost every one of them, there has been an oh, by the way moment, right? We're wrapping up the conversation. We've done all the things on the agenda that we wanted to do. And then there is, oh, by the way, I forgot about this, or I wasn't going to bring this up, but there's this other project that's coming up, or there's this problem I'm trying to solve. It happens all the time in in-person meetings. If you can get in front of them, in front of those clients, and really continue to establish that relationship, there's so much power in it. And I think that's that getting humble. We know we should do it, but we're not doing it. Make more in-person meetings. Again, Zoom counts because you can still read facial expressions, but when you can, make it in person. We've actually changed one of the big metrics that we're measuring to in-person meetings. So make more in-person meetings. Next up on make more sales calls is focus on the activity, not the outcome. And I started to talk about that just a second ago. So one of the things that we had found in our sales process is, for a long time, the presentations, we utilize Common SKU as our order management platform. So you have an opportunity, you create a presentation, an estimate, and an order. So you could kind of track that sales flow. And we found years ago that presentations were an indicator of sales, right? So the person who did the most presentations tended to have the most sales almost all the time. So when we started talking about that, I was like, okay, well then we need to send more presentations. And that works to a point. And then you start to game the system, right? It was like, okay, I'm just going to send more presentations. But sending unsolicited presentations isn't always good. Sometimes it is, right? Because if you're thoughtful about it. But what we found is we were able to inflate those numbers and the sales weren't following. So we started to look at meetings as the thing we want to track. But you can't control whether or not, even if you meet with somebody, you can't control if they're going to buy or if they have an opportunity or whatever. So by focusing on the activity, not the outcome, you can put yourself in a place where you're chasing the right kinds of goals. So I've talked about the difference between lead measures and lag measures, and that's what this is about. Lag measure is the goal. Like, I want to sell $10,000 this week. Lead measures are the things that lead you toward the goal, whether it's presentations, whether it's calls, whether it's meetings. These are things that you can drive, you can make happen without the permission of other people. You can't make that person buy, but you can send them a presentation. For us, we're saying, okay, the new measure is meetings. I'm going to get in front of you. And so those kind of things are things where you can say, well, I hit my goal this week, even if the sales, the lag measure didn't get there. And you can say, I can hear people going, well, it's sales that count. You're right. But if you don't track those lag measures, you don't know what's causing the behavior, and it can become deflating during these times when sales aren't following. But understand, in most people's worlds, we think sales is hunting, and it's usually farming. What you are doing when you're doing the activity is you're planting seeds. They'll be harvested soon or later, but they'll be harvested. So focus on the activity, not the outcome. And then finally, just a heads up that meetings tend to lead to other sales activities. So much like I talked about in the in-person conversation, is they're going, oh, by the way, there's this other thing. So we might go there with our agenda. We'll leave and we'll say, okay, we're going to send them a presentation based on the activities or the conversations we had. We're going to do a spec sample based on the one thing they were really excited. And then of course there's the oh, by the way, which might be a whole separate presentation. We might need to create another meeting from it. Meetings tend to lead to other sales activities. I mentioned Alex Hormozy just a little bit ago. I loved his he called BAM Fam. and it's book a meeting from a meeting, right? Don't leave a meeting without homework. That's so sometimes it's like, okay, you have the meeting and then you get the sale, but there's homework. So if I leave the meeting, I'm always like, okay, so I'm giving you pricing on this, I'm giving you a presentation, I'm getting you a spec sample, I'm writing the order. There's something that should be, if you leave a meeting, you should leave there with activities that are sales activities. Make sure you leave every one of these meetings with homework. Bam, fam, book a meeting from a meeting. So that's tactic 3, make more sales calls. Are we doing on time? All right, cool. All right, guys, this is the one, we don't have to spend a ton of time on this, but it is the thing that we all know, but we don't do. Use the tools we have. We have to spend more time and more energy using promo to sell promo. It is fascinating to me that everybody doesn't do this. The fact is, not only is, let's start with the basic premise that the rule of reciprocity is a real rule of psychology. And it's a real rule of psychology in all cultures, in all religions. And it simply says that if I do something nice for you, if I give you something, you feel compelled to do something nice for me. So that's one of the reasons that branded merchandise is so powerful, is because if you give targeted, appropriate, quality merchandise to a prospect or a customer, they feel good about it, right? They thank you for the marketing you just gave them. So that is number 1 that will build their business. Number 2, it builds trust because you are trying to build your business using the same tools that you're telling them to build their business with. So that just makes sense. Number 3, you become omnipresent. I love it when we're doing stuff on a consistent basis and I walk into a client's office and I see my calendar on the wall, the mouse pad on the thing, the tumbler over here, pens right here, there's a charger right there, and our logo is all over the office. And I always think, what must my competitor be thinking when they walk in, right? Not only does that person have great feelings and I'm everywhere in their office, but it's really hard to kind of take that hill when I'm everywhere on it, right? So what I would say to you is when I say use promo to sell promo, then I would say we're doing a monthly promo, self promo at our team right now. In the past, we've done some quarterly things where we'll do some more expensive items and we go after our top clients. We kind of call that the quarterly appreciation program. And that's been really good for us. But this year I wanted to change the tactic. And so every single month we have some sort of self-promo theme behind it, and it gives us a reason to take those meetings, right? I love the concept that if every time I show up, I'm giving you something of value, I'm providing you, hopefully making you laugh a little bit, you're going to go from saying, oh God, Kirby's coming, to, hey, Kirby's coming. And I think that that's one of the things that we'll do. And then finally, under using promo to sell promos, they see it in the wild. They see how they feel when they get it. And then you get the opportunity to say, hey, do you want your employees, do you want your customers to feel this way? If so, then you can utilize branded merchandise for this as well. So use promo to sell promo. Next up, I almost led into this. Order spec samples every week. Look, if there are any suppliers on the call, and I could hear anybody, I would like be yelling, can I get an amen? There are so many suppliers that I meet with on a regular basis, and they say, hey, just set a reminder, send me art, do this every week. And have I done it? I've done it. Have I done it consistently? Not consistently enough. Greatest distance in the world between I know and I do. So this is one of those things that I would encourage you to set an appointment in your calendar to order spec samples every week. Now, one of the things that I've run into that is a challenge for me on this is that I start feeling like I'm taking advantage of my favorite suppliers. Now, I think that they would say to me, Kirby, if you do spec samples and then you write orders every time you do spec samples, they will not feel taken advantage of because they're getting the business. That's the reason they do spec samples in the first place. Now, I struggle with this because early on in my career, I saw people really do try to take advantage of it. They're trying to use spec samples to do all the sales work. I don't want you to do that. One of the things I would say is be willing to pay for them. Obviously, if a supplier is willing to do it for free, great. But ask yourself if you'd be willing to pay for the spec sample in order to get it in front of your client, because if so, you're probably going to be more thoughtful about the ones you do, and the close rate is going to be higher. So be thoughtful, be willing to pay for spec samples. And guess what, guys? There are suppliers out there who can't do free ones, but they have a paid program for spec samples. Be willing to invest in your business. And one of the ways you can do that is through spec samples. So the final thought I'll give on the spec sample conversation is I like to make a list. I make a list of some of my top partners, my favorite folks, the ones, what their spec sample policies are. So if I have that on my calendar every Friday or whatever it is, it's like I'll go to those ones that are the easiest to work with. But if I feel like I'm starting to tap them out, or I've done, this particular client has already gotten spec samples from this particular supplier, having a list of other suppliers that can keep it fresh is a way that I know I'm showing new and different ideas and solutions to my clients, but I'm also don't feel like I'm tapping into the same supplier and taking advantage. So if that's an issue, making that list might help you kind of overcome that concern, overcome that objection that's happening in your own head. But the big message out of this is use the tools you have. Use promo to sell promo. Do a monthly self promo starting today. Be thinking about those top suppliers that you love to work with, and do something along those lines so you can grow your business. I lied. I have one more thought. Don't just do cheap crap, right? Like I'm fascinated when I see on the Promotional Products Professionals page that somebody says, who has the cheapest self promo? Folks, that's the wrong question, right? Who has the best? Who has the highest return on investment? Who has the coolest self promo? Who has the one that's going to turn the heads and make an impact? Those are different questions. The cheapest, you sell what you hand out, right? For years, I handed out the Bic Click Stick, which is a great pen. It's fine. But I was fascinated because I could never get anybody to buy a more expensive pen until I did a more expensive pen as a self promo, and I handed it out. They got to use it. They got to see it and feel it. And then I was selling both Bic Click Sticks and the more expensive pen. So you tend to sell what you show and what you give out as your self promo. So use those tools. So that's what I kind of finished that thought. Okay, a couple more. Tactic 5, get in community to grow. So one of the things that we have said is during these summer slowdowns, there's an opportunity for you to grow both professionally and personally. You're going to fill your time if you're doing more content, you're relooking at your website, you're making more sales calls, but this is also a great opportunity to look around at the people who surround you. You've seen it before a million times. Jim Rohn, I think, was the first person who coined this, but they say that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. It is actually kind of scary how accurate this is. When you look at those 5 people, people tend to have about the same amount of money. They have the same kind of ideals. They vote the same way. They do the same things. It has such power over our lives, but almost no one, I shouldn't say almost no one, many people are not intentional about it. We're intentional about our kids, right? When our kids come home with somebody and we don't like the way that they act, or their friends are not a good influence on them, you understand that as a parent, that we need to make sure that they are hanging around with the right crowd so they make good choices and they create a good life. But man, we think we're exempt from this once we get older, and we are not. Like, we are the things that we surround ourselves with. We are also the product of what we put in our mind consistently. Now, what I would say is it is better than ever right now that you can surround yourself with amazing people through content. Again, but it's about being intentional. How many of you have podcasts on your phone right now, or intentionally look at different kinds of content that is built to lift you up, that is built to fill your brain up with good things, with inspiration, with education? That's one of the ways that you can raise sort of your own vibration, and you can raise your own goals and those sort of things. So you can do that through those content. I don't have access to Ed Milet that I can go hang out with him. But man, he has 2 podcasts a week. I listen to every one of them because I find that it lifts me up. The same with Alex Hormozy and John Acuff and Cody Sanchez, Gary Vaynerchuk. I am able to get in community with them because I can follow them on social. But on the other side, this is also a great time to be intentional about creating those people in your life professionally, right? It doesn't mean you got to fire everybody. It doesn't mean you have to break ties with your parents or anything like that, but be more intentional about who you let into your life and who elevates you, because the best people elevate each other. I've seen masterminds where that is a great opportunity for you to intentionally put yourself out there into a group. Now, a lot of these masterminds, they cost some money, they cost some investment. But again, I think that is when we value the things that we pay for most of the time. So if you are willing to put yourself out there and kind of pay for it, then you'll show up for the meetings, you'll do the homework, you'll be accountable. So this is a great opportunity during these summer times when it's a little bit slower to get in community, to grow, and be intentional about those 5 people, those groups that you spend the most time with. And sort of the secondary thought around that is this is a great time to spend your time to upgrade your knowledge. Now, that might be in the form of listening to podcasts that are industry podcasts. Obviously, I'm preaching to the choir to this group. And so, and I'm honored that so many of you are willing to take time out of the middle of your day to listen to me. But I think doing more and more of this is something I'm focused on right now. I am looking for books. I'm looking for masterminds. I'm looking for courses. PBAI, I know, has really spent a lot of energy and time in reworking their education platform with JGR and all the work that they do, and Jill and that whole team does over there. And so now might be the time to go, okay, I want to re-engage. Maybe it's time to get my CAS. Maybe it's time to get my MAS. This is the time when things aren't as busy that you go, all right, I'm going to invest that time right now to overcome this summer slowdown. So that's tactic 5. Couple more, and then I will leave time for questions. Tactic 6 is be their CMO. So what I mean by that is you might not have time to do this with every single client, but for those top clients, for those ones you really want to be develop a bigger relationship, grow your sales with, is look at your top clients as if you were their CMO. You were hired today to be in the head of marketing, and you were responsible for the results. What would you be recommending? I think that it's true of all of us in all areas of life, is when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. For many years of my career, I was like, hey, if you are a business and you need to promote your business, I have just the coffee cup for you. And that's great. And that was, I attained a certain level of success doing that, being hard charging in that way. But I remember the first time I was talking to a friend, and he was launching a new business, and they invited us over to their house for dinner. And man, this was one of my really, really good friends. And he's like, what should I do? And of course I said, well, maybe we should do calendars, and maybe we should do this. But it was a B2C business, and we're here in a small town. I'm in Coshocton, Ohio. And I thought, one of the things you need to do, and this was many years ago, but I was like, you need to be doing some radio. There was one radio station in the whole community. I felt like it had the ear of the community. And so I made some recommendations other than that. But one of the things I said, man, you should do remotes, you should do blitzes, you should do this. And we're sitting at his dinner table, and he said, well, you're kind of an ad agency. Do you sell the radio time? And I was like, no, I don't make any commission. But here's the name of the person. She'll take good care of you. And I'll never forget the way he looked at me, because it was totally different. He stopped looking at me as someone who was trying to sell him something, and he started to look at me as a trusted advisor. And what I was sitting at his dinner table acting like I was his CMO. When things are a little bit slower, when things aren't going, you aren't processing as many orders, you're getting as many emails, you're getting so many phone calls, now's the time to really take a hard look, spend some real time and look at your best clients and go, man, I think that they need to be doing this. Or just schedule time and ask them what they're struggling with. This actually happened with a local client. They were struggling because it was a local hospital, and another hospital has come in, and they're trying to convince the local ambulance to deliver to both places, and small town stuff. But I'm like, okay, so this might be the time for you to use some branded merch. Let's do a really cool cup for the EMS, go down, schedule a meeting, do this. And it was a different kind of presentation. And they took us up on it, and it really did help. But it was because I leaned into what are you really struggling with your marketing so that I could put on the CMO hat. And the final thought around this is it's amazing what happens when you recommend things you don't sell. Of course, we all want to make our house payment, right? We got to pay the electric bill and go on vacation. It is summer after all. But if you want to build credibility with the folks that you're trying to serve, not always being on for sales can be a powerful way to do that. So if you put on the hat of their CMO and try and be responsible for those results, I think that you start to look at things a little differently. Final thought on this. If you're like, okay, that's great, but I'm not awesome at thinking strategically, I don't have the time to do that, I want to go back to a previous slide and say, do spec samples. Be thoughtful about those spec samples, walk in there with those ideas. That's sort of, you're stopping short of thinking strategically, but you are walking in and adding value to those people. And so that's another way you can do that in a smaller, quicker way. So do spec samples. All right, final thought, or final tactic, I should say. Just do more. I think it's funny to me because in summer, there are more hours of daylight. That's sort of just math, right? But most of us want to actually work less. Now, part of that's because we're used to not having as much sun maybe, and the weather isn't as nice during those other months, and we want to take as much advantage of that as we can. And man, I totally feel you, and I do the same. But I'm amazed at how often when I'm struggling with almost anything in my life, the answer really is just do more of the thing I already know I should be doing. And so when I say just do more, one of those things is create more value. That might be in the form of content, answering those questions, thinking about the 10 questions you get all the time and creating content that actually provides value around those things. Doing more spec samples, creating more promo that puts in their lives, adding more value as a trusted advisor, create more value. That's number one when it comes to just do more. Number two, when it comes to just do more, is just make more sales calls. As we set our goal for the quarter, and it's funny, we kind of go back, right? We're like, we get really comfortable saying I can only make this many real sales calls, and gosh, I don't think people want me to interrupt their day, and we make excuses in our head for the reasons that we can't do something. Everybody's on vacation. No, they're not. Not everybody. Like I said, I know it looks like that on Instagram, but make more sales calls. If I was listening the other day to a podcast with Hermosi, and he said, Alex Hermosi, and he said, in every instance, the salesperson who was number one in the company is the one who put in the most hours. There's probably a special snowflake out there, but the reality of it is everybody wants the easy button. We want the life hack. Every piece of content is like a hack, right? But pretty much the people who are most successful are the ones who do the most work toward that. So if you want to overcome the summer slowdown, make more sales calls, not less. And then final thought from this is just create more content. And again, create more content that actually adds value. So those are my 7 tactics. And again, when I say create more content, I don't mean create more ads, create more things that actually add value to your folks.